7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, so hi everyone. I am going to be doing a video on something that's a little bit controversial. There's people that are very big proponents of this kind of feeding and people that are very much against this kind of feeding. So I'm going to try and remain as neutral as possible. But before we start talking about a raw food diet, I am going to let you guys know, so I am a student of infectious diseases. I do study these things, so I'm not kind of talking without any type of education behind me. But we're going to jump right into the topic of raw food diets and their use in dogs. There's a lot of people that talk about raw food diets and the use of it in dogs because of the evolutionary background of dogs. So like people talk about how dogs were descended from wolves, and therefore because their GI tract is geared towards raw based diets, then they like to suggest that it's the best thing to be feeding. And in all honesty, I think that does skip a whole section that we should be looking at as well. That just considers the environment that they were in back then. And the fact is that that's not the environment that they're in nowadays. When they were wolves, yes, they were eating a raw food or a raw meat diet, but they were not in extreme close contact with human beings. And although the commercially based dog food industry has only been around for probably like 100 years, I would say, the notion of having a dog as a pet inside your house is quite novel. There's certain individuals back in history that would have this, but having a dog constantly in close contact with you is a pretty novel idea. The majority of dogs, 100 years ago, were not inside pets. So they were normally working dogs outside. And as we get closer and closer to animals, it increases our chances of propagating infectious diseases between the two, which means that you have a higher chance of giving your dog something as well as getting something from your dog. And basically, I think that raw food diets can work as long as people are very, very, very careful. You have to be very responsible. It takes a lot of work to be able to make it safe for everyone that's involved. It might be totally fine for your dog to eat a raw food diet, but you have to also consider the people that are going to be exposed to it in the process. So I think that considering the entire environment that the dog is in is also a very important thing. A lot of people, when they first talk about raw food diets, one of the main things that they're worried about is bacteria and what that can do to dogs, basically. And I think that, the pH of the stomach really does take care of a lot of bacteria that would be on the meat in the first place. But it does emphasize the fact that you have to be very careful with how that meat is prepared. So what I mean by that is it really does involve having to know how long the meat took to be butchered, how long it was exposed to temperatures that could be conducive to bacterial growth, how long the meat has been frozen, because there's a certain length of period that has to be covered so that certain parasites that are encysted are killed. And it's just important to know basically from start to finish how that food got to your dog in the first place. So it is a more tedious task to do. I think one of the things that people don't necessarily think about too much in meat is parasites, and I was a bit shocked because I did watch a couple of videos from some vets that were talking about, they were proponents for a raw food diet, and they were saying that there's not really any parasites that are in meat that can be given to dogs, and I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but there's a lot of different things, different parasites that can encyst in meat. Taenia species, so species of tapeworm that can be given to your dog, can encyst in muscle tissue. So that's one parasite right there. Also, a lot of people like to feed liver to their dogs as a raw-based diet. The liver is the main place where a parasite called Echinococcus granulosus creates their cysts, their hydatid cysts, and dogs are the definitive host. So if you want to figure out a little bit more about that, just YouTube hydatid cyst and it'll explain a lot. Something that you don't necessarily want your kids to get or your friends to get, no one to get, actually. It's not a very fun thing. So there are parasites that can be in meat, especially if you're feeding muscle tissue as well as organs, especially if you're feeding like whole carcasses. I've seen some people that have actually fed a whole deer to their dog, and of course if they're exposed to the GI tract, then definitely there's a lot of parasites that can be in the GI tract. So with this video, I'm not necessarily condemning people that feed a raw-based diet. I do think though that people don't necessarily take it as seriously as they really should be taking it. For example, I would never feed my dog bones. I've seen too many perforations of the intestine to ever feed my dog a bone. And also people don't take the preparation of the meat as seriously as really it should be. It's also important to, like I said, look at the environment of the dog and the people that are going to be exposed. So if you have a small child, is it really a conducive thing to be having a dog eating a raw food diet and then having a child that's crawling on the ground where that dog was eating and then putting their fingers in their mouth? It's basically, you just have to weigh the pros and cons, weigh whether or not you're willing to make that commitment, because it is a big commitment, and I don't think that a lot of people realize how big of a commitment it is. I personally probably will never feed Aspen a raw food diet, just because it's, considering the fact that I, in the future maybe will have children and she will be around, I would never want to have my children exposed to situations like that. I know how much work would be involved in it, and I would rather feed cooked meat than raw meat and just avoid the possibility of missing something while washing her dishes or something like that. It's a lot more work than people really do realize. So I think that's basically going to cover it. If you guys have any further things that you want to add to this discussion, you can always leave it in the comments down below, and people can go and see what's going on down in the comments. And yeah, I hope that you guys enjoyed this video. I hope that it was a little bit helpful with educating a little bit more about raw food diets. I'm not saying that people that feed raw food diets are horrible or anything like that. I'm just saying that I think that there's a lot less attention that's given towards the preparation of meat that there actually should be. And I don't know, it's up to you guys. Everyone can do whatever they feel is best for their animal, as long as they are well educated on the matter and know the benefits and risks that they're exposing their animal to in the first place. So that's my opinion, basically. Anyways, so I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you want, give it a thumbs up, and I'll see you guys later.